Everyone, and welcome to this community meeting in relation to the Long Bay Beef Island Beach Management Plan, which is currently available on government's website for comments. But in addition to that, we felt it necessary to come to you this evening and present to you the main areas of the plan, and this builds on an earlier set of meetings that took place in April of this year, as well as a survey. So I would like to recognize, above all, the Premier and District Representative for the 7th District, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, the member of the 8th District and the Minister for Health and Social Development, Honorable Marlon Penn, the Minister of Natural Resources and Labor, Honorable Melvin Mitch Turnbull. Ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome. Before we begin, I would like to invite Mr. Dylan Penn to please come to the front and open this meeting in prayer. Mr. Penn, please.
Maybe I'll stand. Good evening. Dear God, we give you thanks, first of all, for life. We give you thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight to discuss this very important plan. We give you thanks for the persons who have developed this plan, as well as the persons who are about to receive the information contained therein. We know that the development of Long Bay is an important one for not just the community, but for the territory at large. So Lord, we ask you to cover this meeting with a spirit of open-mindedness, a spirit of information, and spirit of really longing to see the betterment of the Virgin Islands. Bless those who are already here, as well as those who are coming. May all that is said and done here tonight be done in good and proper order, and may it result in a better Virgin Islands for all. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Just to introduce myself, I am Joseph Smith Abbott. I am the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, and I'll be moderating the opening session of the meeting, and then I will hand the meeting over to Ms. Angela Burnett Penn, who will actually present the main aspects of the plan, and the question and answer session will be moderated by the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Mervyn Hastings. So that's the general structure of the meeting this evening. But above all, I would like to again invite the Premier and Representative for the 7th District, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, to move his remarks.
Good evening to everyone here. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I want to acknowledge my cabinet colleagues, Minister for Health and Social Development and Member for the 8th District, Honorable Marlon Penn, as well as the Subject Minister, Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, and Representative for the 2nd District, Honorable Melvin Mitch Turnbull. PS, and to your entire team, Natural Resources, grateful for putting on this meeting, and grateful for all the members of the community being here. I think that this project is an example of good governance, because good governance is not just adherence to whatever abstract rules we come up with. Good governance is engaging with the community. It's allowing the democratic process to be alive and well. You cannot have good governance outside of having a very strong, engaging relationship with the community who is being governed, and allowing them to participate in the process. And I just want to congratulate the Ministry for Natural Resources and Labor for this process. I've been to several meetings on this particular topic. In fact, I've seen some of you at these particular meetings. We've come up with a plan. We've received feedback, we've made adjustments to plans, and we've come back to you. This is how it should be. Certainly, the feedback and the plan that we've been able to come up with has been based on consultation, but also based on facts, based on research, based on, what we really want to see, not just today, but for coming generations, what we want our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren to be able to experience. We know Long Bay Beach is a beach that we love. We know that certainly we have different interests on the beach. You have persons, even Miss Penn herself is a avid user of the beach. We do our exercise there. We have our recreation there. We spend family time there. And of course, we have our businesses there. We have residents there. We have visitors there. And it's important for us to be able to balance all of these interests. And I believe that the plan that Sister Bonnet Penn has been able to present is one seeking to balance all of those different. Thank you, colleague. The plan that Sister Bonnet Penn has presented or will be presenting to us is one that seeks to find a balance between all of those interests while seeking to preserve the beach for future generations. So certainly I want to congratulate you all for the hard work and the excellent work that you have done. I'm looking forward to the plan being presented tonight, and for, of course, persons to give their feedback on the completed plan. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm always grateful to have these meetings and engage with the community, and looking forward to the meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and just like to highlight the fact that he is he's making reference to an earlier engagement with the community in April, as I said, and it also builds on the survey results that were widely distributed as well as used to inform this new iteration of the plan. So thank you, Premier. At this time, I would like to invite Honorable Marlon Penn, who is the representative of the 8th District and the Minister for Health and Social Development. Honorable Penn, please.
Pleasant good evening. First of all, I want to apologize for my tardiness. Because I was tardy, I mean it cuts into my time then, so I'll be brief. But I just want to say again thank you to, and before I begin, I just want to say acknowledge my colleagues, Honorable Premier, Member for the 7th District, Honorable Member for the 2nd District, Honorable Member Mitch Turnbull, PS, Ministry team, Mr. Angela Penn Burnett, who has been critical and involved in this process from the beginning to where we are today. And I want to say pleasant good evening to you, the vendors, concerned citizens, and just members of the BVI community. This project has been one of those projects that's much talked about. It's something that we wanted to get it right and have the right engagement with the public on this particular initiative. Long Bay Beach is special to us in the Eastern Long Island community. Something as a facility, is a beach that is dear to our hearts. And we want to find the right balance between development and the social aspects of the Long Bay Beach. It makes no sense to have a beautiful gem like Long Bay and not be able to monetize it, not be able to have your people in public make some money off of Long Bay Beach. But we also have to make sure that we preserve it so that future generations have an opportunity to enjoy the beauty that we've enjoyed, that is Long Bay Beach Island. So we're here today to have that discussion. We started that dialogue some months ago with Angela and her team, and it was a very good, engaging dialogue. I intend we have now extended that dialogue tonight with a more developed plan, with a more developed approach to how we intend to manage and operate on the beach. I'm hopeful that we could still have the same level of engagement tonight so that we could then go back and finalize a way forward for us in this facility. I know there are some concerns, and I'm hopeful that at the end of the presentation, all those concerns will be answered, and we could be able to move from here unified as a community, unified as a territory, in a way forward in terms of the development of this facility. Long Bay Beach is not just there to us in the 7th and 8th district, but it's also a treasure of this entire territory, and one that we need to preserve, one we need to properly manage, and one we need to be able to have for generations to come. So again, I'm here to listen to the concerns of the vendors, concerns of the residents, and concerns of the technical team. But more importantly, I want us to leave here with one voice, with a way forward for the development of this beach for the foreseeable future moving forward. I thank you.
Honorable Penn, thank you very much for your comments and your remarks. Just simply as the Premier would have done, highlighting the importance of this beach not only to the community, but to the larger Virgin Islands space in terms of the multiple uses for this particular beach, recreational as well as commercial, and the overall placement in the overall development of the territory. So at this particular time, I would like to invite the Minister for Natural Resources, the subject minister under whose plan this falls under, Honorable Melvin Mitch Turnbull, to render his remarks at this time. Honorable, please.
Say anything until Marlon clap for me. Oh, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here. Honorable Premier, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, and member for the 7th District, Honorable Marlon A. Penn, Minister for Health and Social Development, and member for the 8th District. Before I start with what I'm going to say, the two of them set me up. All the other meetings we've been to, we ain't had on no jacket and tie. Then I jacket and I ain't got no jacket, so I apologize. In truthfully and honesty, I believe what is important for me is to recognize the hard work of the ministry team and the persons involved, and more so the involvement of the community here between the Eastern Long communities and the wider Virgin Islands. This project, when I came in on May 5th as minister, but specifically on May 13th, my first day in office, I realized and recognized immediately that there was some work being undertaken by the ministry team. I want to recognize especially P.S. Abbott Smith, or Smith Abbott, I think, I always get it wrong, but P.S. in the ministry. I want to recognize Ms. Angela Burnett Penn and Mr. Mervyn Hastings and the entire team, Argel, and my whole team is here. So I know I'm in the East. Brady already warned me. He sent me a WhatsApp telling me be careful what I say. So I'm not going to say much. But this project, what it does for the community and more so for the sustainability of how we protect, how we promote, how we preserve the God-given gifts that we have in this territory. I say it all the time, and there's no fault of my own. God has gifted the BVI with a lot of treasures that if we're not careful, the very thing that we make money from, if we don't preserve it, if we don't protect it and promote it, then we'll have nothing else to be able to market to the people. So I believe this pilot project here on the Eastern Long Bay Beef Island Beach is a tremendous project that would help to create this balance, to create this understanding and this knowledge of persons who will use the beach, not just for the tourists, but specifically and most importantly, for the people of the communities, for the visitors and the residents who live in this community. Because sometimes we get carried away. There's nothing wrong with getting the dollars in, but sometimes we get carried away with getting busy doing things for the tourists and doing things for the dollars. But there are those of us, when the tourists leave, we still have to enjoy the beach. So I believe it is important that we join this partnership. And I want to thank the Honorable Member for the 8th and the Honorable Premier as well for joining with me. They have been to 2 meetings that we've had pre the online meeting to understand what this project is about. And I believe what the team has put together would be a tremendous step in the right direction that other beaches and other places in the territory could model off of, because it is not about trying to destroy or disenfranchise everybody. It's trying to get everybody involved in and recognize the importance. Yes, there is a King Garden beach and a Just Van Dyke, and there are other beaches throughout the territory, but I believe if we set this platform with your engagement and your involvement, it will go a long way towards future generations. So I just want to recognize the teams who are part of the Technical Review Committee, teams from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, the Department of Disaster Management, the BVI Tourist Board, Fire and Rescue Department, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, the National Parks Trust, BVI Ports Authority, the Survey Department, and the independent partners we have are Dr. Shannon Gore and Mr. Dylan Penn, who led us in prayer earlier. So, and town and country planning as well. So all of those persons together with you, the community, have been involved in the design, and Public Works Department as well have been involved in the design, in the development of what you have said before. And we hope that you are pleased and interested, but more so engaged to give your input and your ideas to how we could finalize this project for its implementation. So on behalf of the ministry team, everyone who's here, I thank you guys, and I look forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you, PS.
Thank you, Minister. And again, just simply to highlight the balance that is required between the interests, commercial interests, as well as the residential interest in the use of this beach, which we will obviously hear a little bit more in a very short moment, as a matter of fact. I recognize the fact that the director of the Tourist Board, Mr. Clive McCoy, inevitably was absent. He would have liked to have been here to render his remarks, but he's certainly conveyed before his support for this plan and the importance in the overall tourism product. He recognizes the fact that this particular project will enable the territory to position itself as beach management plans will result not only from this particular process here at Long Bay, but they're founded in the beach use plan, or beach use policy, which is also available on the website, on government's website. So that is certainly something that I can convey on his behalf. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Angela Burnett Penn, who has steadfastly led the process of not only consulting with a number of you over a longer period of time, but also in coalescing all the views, both those garnered from these types of meetings as well as from online surveys and in technical conversations that would have been had, conversations that would have been held with policymakers and decision makers. So without further ado, I would like to turn over to Ms. Burnett Penn, who will take us through the actual plan in a short moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, PS. You'll just give me a moment while I bring the presentation up. Okay, so a pleasant good evening again to everyone. I hope I'm not blocking anyone's view. I'll have to progress through the presentation fairly quickly in order to get through all of the main points on the plan, but I just want to highlight that there will be ample room for clarifications, questions, comments at the end of the presentation, and that will include the ability to go back to any of the slides and seek additional clarification. And as you'll see at the end, I'll present a link where you can actually go and download the full plan. It's available on our website, so you can read it, study it, and we're allowing, in addition for comments that would be received this evening, we're allowing for persons to submit written comments until the 15th of November, okay? And we'll give you the email address. Oh. Oh, the TV itself. So one moment while we try to fix that. There was a remote, I think, somewhere. Oh, okay. Technology doesn't always agree with me for some reason. It's up? Okay, you let me know if it goes down, please. Okay, so before we go into the details of the plan, I'd just like to quickly speak on why a plan in the first place. Why do we need a plan for Long Bay? Firstly, it's an environmentally significant area. It's one of the few places in the entire territory, really, where we still have a full, intact beach ecosystem with everything from fringing coral reefs along each side of the bay that is supported by the pristine water of the bay, all the way through to salt ponds that help to actually protect that pristine water quality. So it's really a rare gem, as has been highlighted in many ways already. In addition to that, Long Bay has always been an important, significant part of our social life, cultural life, spiritual life, recreational life. And I'm sure that everybody in this room has partaked in one of the activities listed here, enjoyed one of those. But I'd just like to highlight, in addition to that, there's a whole literature around how natural spaces, and in particular beaches, are significant for supporting mental health and well-being. And while this is the place that people vacation, this is where we live. And we have to make sure that in all that we do, we're preserving quality of life for residents and preserving spaces where people can enjoy and seek to be well. I should just also highlight that it's one of the most popular and visited beaches in the territory. Data from our previous lifeguard program suggested the third most popular in the territory, and perhaps from a residential use perspective, probably ranking at the top. But we've seen in recent years there's been a dramatic change, both in terms of the activities at the beach and the use of that beach. So we've seen a number of new activities come on the scene. In particular, since Hurricane Irma in 2017, we've seen much heavier visitation by cruise ship passengers. We've seen the establishment of permanent commercial activity for the first time. We've seen that include beach chair rentals, in addition to beach/bar restaurants, souvenir-type vending operations. We also have commercial water sports activity on the beach. And the residential or local use has also changed as well. We've seen a lot more prevalence of parties with loudspeakers, to the point where it's become a noise pollution issue, as you'll see from the survey data. Basically now every Saturday and Sunday, there's a presence of some kind of party. There's also a much heavier presence of barbecuing and outdoor cooking activity. In fact, there was a time not so long ago when that activity didn't exist on the beach, and now it's become pretty prevalent. And then we also see more regular anchoring by yachts. So all of these things combined, and I'll just show you, for those of, well, everybody in the room would be very familiar with the beach, but for those persons online, some images of some of the current activity, and you can see, obviously, some of the impacts that is coming from a result of those, as a result of those. So all of those things together, we've seen Long Bay move from a very low-threat beach to being one of the highest-threat beaches in the territory, experiencing 11 of the 17 potential threats to beaches that were identified in the 2020 Virgin Islands beach policy, with the beach being at risk for another 3 threats. And these range everything from excessive littering of the beach to significant destruction of the vegetation, which is really important to maintain the beach health over time, and conflicting usage of the beach. I want to just highlight the significant loss of the vegetation. You can see for yourself, this is a comparison of an aerial photograph from 2002 at the top compared to 2020. And we've basically lost the sea grape tree line that ran along the extent of the beach. And we've significantly lost the eastern sand dune. And I just want to highlight here the importance of the sand dune system and the vegetation, both the sea grape tree line and the vegetation of the dune, to maintaining a healthy beach over time. It acts as a sand reservoir. It acts as an important habitat, including for sea turtle nesting, and there are a number of environmental experts in the room that can speak to that. And the last time we presented to the community, we spent a lot of time trying to explain the science of why protecting the vegetation and protecting the dune is critical to make sure that we have a beach, not just 5, 10, 15 years from now, but 50, 100 years from now, especially as we see new threats like sea level rise come about. So as a part of our planning process, we conducted a public survey to get a pulse of how the public feels about the beach, their current levels of satisfaction, desired directions of change, and their vision for the long-term development of Long Bay. We had a total of 300 persons responding to that survey, and they represented quite a good spectrum in terms of age range, also where persons live, the communities that they come from, with naturally, I think, a heavier representation from the 8th District and the 7th District. But I think significantly, we see that the people who responded to this survey are very vested in Long Bay, with about 92% of persons, I think, saying that Long Bay is either important or very important to them. So the people who responded are really the views that matter. And what we see here is that those persons are saying that their overall use of the beach and their enjoyment of the beach have reduced as a result of the recent changes. So 51% of respondents say that they enjoy the beach less, and 48% of respondents say that they use the beach less often. And of course, this is not the direction of change that any of us would want to see for usage or users of the beach. So the survey data, which is actually also published on the website and you can go and review in detail, captured a lot of detail to inform the planning process. So we asked about specific features of the beach, and the list here are the things that people were completely satisfied or satisfied with. And the data presented is what would be the most prevalent or common response expressed in the survey. We also captured the features that people are neutral about, so where they're neither dissatisfied or satisfied. And then we captured those features that persons are totally unsatisfied or unsatisfied with. And I want to stop and focus here for a moment, because these were really the pain points that we sought to address in the beach management plan. So in terms of the overall environment, we see a lot of concern about the overall cleanliness of the beach. We see a concern about lack of shade trees and vegetation, concern about noise levels, and in particular, we see loud music flagging on this list. And then we see that people want more amenities and facilities. So things like a lifeguard presence is highlighted, more waste facilities, picnic tables, shade umbrellas, enhanced restroom facilities, and an enhanced main access road. And in terms of commercial activities, the one commercial activity that flagged here is the presence of or prevalence of the beach chairs. So you'll see as I go through how the beach management plan has sought to address these concerns. So the purpose of the plan then is really simple. It is to urgently address existing threats and to restore and maintain user satisfaction and create the enabling environment to realize the vision for the beach, which I'll share with you in a moment. But that vision really comes out of looking at the survey data, the other comments and feedback we would have received through this process, and really assessing and taking into consideration the traditional use of Long Bay. The plan has been developed through a stepwise process, as has already been outlined. I just want to flag again the fact that this has not, while it's been a Ministry of Natural Resources-led effort, it has certainly not been a ministry-only effort. We have engaged with well over 10 agencies, some of them were listed this evening, in development of this plan through our technical review committee. And we also had other agencies like Deputy Governor's Office, which is responsible for Crown Estate Management, involved in the process, and independent experts such as Dr. Shannon Gore, who has done a lot of work on beaches, including doing her PhD on beaches in BVA. So we're going through a final round of public consultation to now get us to a final detailed plan. And the detailed plan includes multiple components. I'll be going through each of them briefly this evening, and we can take questions on all components. The vision that is proposed, and this is something that we will take feedback on as well, is a beach that we can all be proud of, where protection of the natural environment is prioritized, and where local, recreational, spiritual, cultural, economic, and tourism needs are carefully balanced. In keeping with that vision, we sought to define an identity for the beach as well as a character for the beach that should be preserved by implementation of the plan. So by way of identity, we're proposing that Long Bay remains primarily for recreational use and enjoyment by all residents while accommodating tourism and commercial activity at a sustainable level. And what that means in practice is that traditional uses should be supported by the plan, including making sure that Long Bay is protected as a swimming beach. So one of the things that hasn't been said yet is that this beach is really unique in that it's the only beach attached to Tortola that is safe for swimming year-round because it is in a sheltered space. And so it's important that we maintain that as a beach that persons can go and swim at. Also, it means that activities of one user group should not unduly impact or displace activities of other user groups. And that extends to activities of and use by tourists, not displacing or unduly impacting use by residents. And part of that means making sure that tourism use is at sustainable densities and includes sustainable activities. For the character, we're mainly concerned with making sure that the natural aesthetic of the beach is maintained, and that means making sure that any development that is introduced in the space blends into the natural environment as opposed to dominating the beach landscape. So in terms of views about development at Long Bay, this is data captured from the survey. I think the overwhelming message here is that the majority of the public, 95%, does not want to see Long Bay be commercially developed as a major tourist destination. Rather, we see a slight majority of respondents, 52%, indicating that they would like to see some commercial development be allowed. However, that development should be limited and carefully planned to preserve the environment, maintain a natural aesthetic, and balance tourist and recreational use of the beach. I think the other important finding is that there's still a significant share of the public, I think about 42% combined, that does not want to see any permanent commercial activity at the beach, with about 25% saying that they would just like to see basic public amenities such as restrooms, and as much as 1/5 of the public saying that they don't want to see any development at all, with Long Bay being preserved in its natural undeveloped state. So we're clearly past this point. We're also past this point at this stage. So we're here at the point where we already have some commercial activity. So really what we focused on in the plan is making sure that we achieve a vision around this space where we have some commercial development that is carefully balanced to meet the needs of all stakeholders. So I'll quickly take you through the spatial plan. We're all very familiar with the location of Long Bay, so I won't say much about that. But in terms of context, I do want to highlight that the majority of lands surrounding Long Bay fall within parcel 40, which is owned by the Crown. This was land that was actually fairly recently acquired by the Crown, I think about $5.5 million, expressly by a cabinet decision, for the purpose of protecting the environment. And so I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as we go through the plan. I also just want to highlight that there is still a sliver, the start of the access road to the beach, that is still within a separate parcel that is privately owned. So that's part of the context to keep in mind as well as we discuss. In terms of accesses, public access and entrances, there have rarely been two motorable accesses to the beach. One that passes over parcel 40 along the salt pond that is mainly publicly owned, and then one that is really goes through a full private estate, Little Mountain, that, as we know, in times past has been closed off at points, and it's currently open for access. And then we have, coming through those two accesses, a combination of 3 entrances to the seashore, the western, central, and eastern entrances. So I'll take you from sort of an overview, bird's eye view, and drill down into the plan. So from a wide perspective, we're proposing that all recreational and commercial activity be concentrated over on the eastern dune, that we're going to, as a part of preserving Long Bay as a swimming beach, make sure that there's a passive water sports zone and that zone is set back sufficiently to allow swimming activity to continue safely along the entire length of the beach. In addition to that, we're proposing the introduction of a new recreational amenity or attraction in the form of a bird-watching hiking trail that will meander along the salt pond and take you right up to a lookout deck that would offer really nice panoramic views of the eastern and southern keys. Very prevalent on the map at this macro view is the sea grape tree line, which we intend to restore to its original density along the length of the beach. So I'll drill down now into the eastern dune system to give you some more details there. I've already mentioned the restoration of the sea grape tree line. Another important aspect from a protection perspective is the introduction of this beach dune barrier system, which is essentially a series of wooden posts. And that is intended to protect this eastern dune, allow that critical vegetation to recover. So of course that would mean that vehicles would no longer be able to access that space. And so in lieu of that, as was historically the case, parking will be accommodated outside of that area. So we're introducing 2 public structured parking lots. These would be unpaved but screened areas in the central area of the beach. On the eastern side, we're also introducing a dedicated taxi parking area for tour buses. So as a resident and local user of the beach, I just want to highlight some of the features to accommodate the traditional activities. Of course, in addition to the seascape and the seashore itself, within the dune system, we're proposing a picnic area that runs linear right at the back of the sea grape tree line, so it can be shaded by that sea grape tree line. And that would accommodate the family picnics, birthday parties, other traditional activities. We're also proposing the inclusion of 2 purpose-built barbecue pits along the eastern side to facilitate that outdoor cooking barbecue activity that has now become well enjoyed at the beach. So from a commercial and tourism perspective now, we've sought to create a hub for that activity, and that's in this area here. It's deliberately offset from the central access to the beach as well as the eastern access, so that we allow Long Bay to maintain a natural aesthetic, so that when you arrive at the beach, you're not confronted with development, you're confronted with a natural environment, and you have the opportunity to choose to engage in that commercial space. As a tourist, however, coming to the beach, your natural point of entrance would be here, close to the taxi parking lot, so that this now becomes your main entrance to the beach. So you enter the beach right along the area in red, which is the vending zone. I'll show you the details of that. So you interact immediately with that vending zone. Persons who choose to buy a drink or grab something to eat can sit and enjoy that in this outdoor eating area, and then naturally proceed out to the seashore as they wish. And there we have designated a zone for beach chairs. The restroom facility will remain where it is, but it would be enhanced to include things like outdoor showers. We're proposing removing the bin that's at the entrance right now to the area behind the restroom facility, just as a more appropriate fit for that. So I think I've covered all of the main points there. Oh yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that there's an admin building directly adjacent to the vending zone, and that's meant to support the management of the beach as well as the visitor experience over time. And I should say that you'll see in a moment, it includes restroom facilities to support the vending activity specifically. So this is that in 3D, and I'll zoom further now into the vending zone. And just to have you appreciate at this stage that there's a combination of small and medium units that are being proposed in an alternating fashion. Okay, and that's, again, the site plan in 3D. And now I'll take you through quickly the facilities plan, where you can get a better appreciation of what this looks like in detail. This is a sort of a representation of what that beach dune barrier system might look like. This is an image actually taken from neighboring Megan's Bay on St. Thomas. The picnic area will essentially be a series of picnic tables, your standard picnic benches. We're proposing about 25 of those along the sea grape tree line. The birdwatching hiking trail would have a natural path supported by tree logs for reinforcement where necessary. We're also proposing rest benches strategically placed along that path to help facilitate persons just enjoying the trail. And then the lookout deck is an open-air 12 by 12 deck, which would have a maximum capacity of about 20 persons. In terms of the vending zone, we're looking at a total of 6 units, 3 small, 3 medium units, And you can see the zone is fronted by a boardwalk to help transition between the spaces. Each of the units would have a handicap access to the deck, so the units are slightly elevated, about 8 inches, I think, from the sand level, and that's to help with the movement of the sand for the health of the beach, but also to help with vantage point out to sea. So again, the connection to the outdoor eating area, and at the back of the zone, we've included a boardwalk as well as a lay-by to help facilitate the servicing or the provisioning of those units. So just to give you a quick sense of floor plan, for the small units, it's a very simple open floor plan. We're looking at about 10 by 10 units. This is a rendering of that. It's meant to be very flexible. Persons would be allowed to outfit and spec out these units to their specific needs. And the medium vending units are really intended to facilitate bar/restaurant type operations. Again, these would be leased as shells, and so what you're seeing as a floor plan is just an example of what it might look like, where the front area is open air, intended for bar/food service, and then the back is more enclosed and serving as the kitchen space. These units are 16 by 16, and that doesn't include the deck space, which I think is a 10-foot deck, and I should say the smaller units, I think it's a 4-foot deck. So this is, again, just to give you an example of how that kitchen space might be laid out. We try to make sure that there are different ways to accommodate all of the required kitchen and desired kitchen equipment. So just to demonstrate that it works within that 16 by 16 space. These are some impressions of the outdoor eating area, essentially circular picnic tables with attached benches and shade umbrellas, and there would also be shading from the vegetation that would be restored in that area. And the administrative unit, a fairly small unit, 10 by 10 about, and then there's a mail and restroom facility attached. And like I said, this is really dedicated to the staff of the beach, as well as dedicated to staff of persons attached to the vending zone, so that they can have separate facilities from the public. The beach chair zone, I'll speak a little later to the configuration of this, but I just want to highlight that we're proposing the introduction of some storage facilities to help with properly storing those chairs when they're packed away in a more environmentally friendly and aesthetic manner. This is just an impression of conceptually what those units might look like. Parking facilities, the central parking lot, we're looking at a capacity of 74 spaces, a capacity of 10 spaces on the eastern parking lot. So in total, that's 84 spaces for public parking. And the taxi parking lot, we're looking at a capacity of 14 spaces. We'll be introducing a combination of different sorts of waste management facilities, some service bins, and those would be screened, a bin dedicated to the vending zone, which will also be screened, and then a system of bins, 3 bins, each within the picnic zone, and that's to ensure that we accommodate for recycling within the waste management plan. So very quickly, I want to touch on the environmental restoration and protection plan. I think it is important to highlight that triggered by the cabinet decision to purchase this area as Crown property, part and parcel of that decision was that the area would become a national park managed by the National Parks Trust. And that process to declare this area as a national park/marine park was triggered quite some time ago, and it is now well advanced. What I do want to highlight is that the objectives of a national park, they're listed here in detail, I won't read through them, but that the objectives of a national park in no way conflict or contradict with the plan that is being proposed, including having commercial activity at the beach. If anything, part of the objective of a national park is to better support and manage that type of activity and make sure that the visitor experience is maintained and that the environment supporting that experience is also best protected. So the Environmental Restoration and Protection Plan treats all of the elements of the environment at the beach, and for each of them, we define a restoration or protection goal, standards to be maintained, as well as environmental management measures to make sure that those standards are maintained. So an example might be, for example, water quality standard. Okay, so I'll just quickly speak to the vegetation line restoration goal, which is 100% on the western dune, 90% on the eastern dune, and that's in consideration of the various activities that we'll have there, and also to make sure that we can have slightly larger view channels out to sea from the Vending Zone area. So we'll be focusing on the sea grape tree for restoration, but also other species that are important, like the beach morning glory. I just want to remind persons, because it can be so easy to forget, what this historic sea grape tree line at Long Bay looks like. I actually was fortunate to take these photos the weekend before Hurricane Irma, so this wasn't that long ago. There's still a remnant of that original tree line, and from that we can determine what the density was. So in about a 25-meter segment of beach, we had about 5 clusters of sea grape trees, each with 2 to 3 trees each, and that's essentially the density that we would like to restore to. On the wider beach dune system itself, we are looking at 100% restoration on the western dune and 75% restoration on the eastern dune. And these are just some of the species that we'll be focusing on restoring. Important species like the lignum vitae, loblolly, which is really good for shade, and marble tree, which is good for creating bird habitat, etc. So we're going to conclude the presentation by going through quickly the management measures that are proposed and the rules, and then just a slide or two on implementation. So there are some management measures built into the spatial plan. So for example, by virtue of us closing off this dune, protecting it with this barrier system, not only will we be doing a lot to protect the environment, but also inherently reduce the noise pollution issue, as well as reduce the generation of waste on the beach. But we're proposing additional measures to deal with noise pollution. You'll recall that this was one of the major concerns flagged from the survey. So you'll see this in a moment, but it's been a long-standing requirement that persons apply to the ministry for permission to have events at the beach, in particular to use loudspeakers. So as a part of our management, and this is something we're putting out for reaction, for consultation, we're proposing that there be a certain percentage of Saturdays and Sundays that are preserved as no event days. So we're suggesting 50% as a starting point for discussion, either way, less or more, as the public might desire. Also, we're proposing that we respect really sacred traditional religious holidays like Good Friday, Easter Sunday, Christmas, by not having commercial entertainment events on those days, and to make sure that there is no conflict in use, looking at a maximum of 2 events at a time, and that those events be spread over the beach, and ensuring that there is signage so that persons are aware of the legal requirements around noise pollution, because it's not always remembered, but there is actually the Noise Control and Abatement Act, and what that act says is that persons can use a loudspeaker so long as it is operated not to give reasonable cause for annoyance, to persons in the area in which the loudspeaker is being operated. And the act includes a test of reasonableness. Part of that includes looking at established standards. So as a part of our planning effort, we did a scan of international standards that exist in terms of looking at what's safe exposure to noise, looking at noise levels that would create a disturbance in different types of spaces, indoor spaces, outdoor spaces. There are even standards specific to beaches. So based on that review, we're suggesting some, and these would just be guidelines, these wouldn't be legal requirements, but suggesting some guidelines to help people check their use of the beach and respect others as they enjoy their music, etc. We've sought to define a sustainable carrying capacity for Long Bay. Carrying capacity is basically the idea that if you use a resource too much, if too many people are using a resource at a time, it will over time degrade the environment, but it will also reduce or minimize the experience or enjoyment that each person has from using that space. So again, there are international standards that exist around this. The committee looked at those standards, and in terms of tourist use, we're proposing that we stick with the World Tourism Organization standard. And in the context of Long Bay, what that would mean is that we could accommodate a total of 450 tourists at a time at Long Bay. And we typically have 2 cycles at the beach, morning and afternoon. So over the course of a full day, you're looking at a maximum of 900 tourists at Long Bay. I should flag that the beach is currently operating well within those limits based on the data that we collected from the main tour operators and an impression from the Ports Authority in terms of independent operators. We're in around the region of about 650 up to that number per day. So we've set this as a cap, as a maximum. And of course, as a high-end destination, the ministry would propose that we try to really look at sticking within the current levels that we're currently operating in. Okay, so just to give you an impression of what that density would be at 450 tourists at a time, it means that each tourist would have 10 square meters of beach to themselves. That's the equivalent of putting yourself in about a 10-foot by 10-foot box. Okay, so that in about a 105-foot segment of the beach, you would be packing about 50 persons into that space. Now, in consideration of the concept of sharing the beach and maintaining that identity where tourist use is not unduly impacting or displacing residential use, we thought it fit to look at a reduced capacity on the weekends when the beach is heavily in demand by residents, right? So on the weekends, we're proposing that there's another standard out there, the high standard public beach, which in the context of Long Bay would mean 225 tourists at the beach at a time. And again, to give you an impression of that density, we're basically looking at half the density. So each person would now have 20 square meters of space to themselves, and in that same segment of beach, having about 25 persons as opposed to 50. Okay? In terms of the beach chairs, there was quite a bit of discussion around this. Again, this flagged as one of the points of dissatisfaction on the survey. There are currently about 400 chairs operating on the beach, and we came to the decision to propose that we cap the beach chair operation at the existing level, so not reducing the number of chairs, but introducing measures to basically make sure that that number does not impede or displace residential use. And so you'll see in a moment what we're proposing in terms of how that's done on the weekends. But just to point out here that at 400 chairs, the beach chair zone would take up about 600 feet, which is about 75% of the eastern side of the beach and about 60% of the width of the beach. And that would be with the chairs over 3 rows. So we can come back to this if persons want, but this is an impression of what, in order to fit those 400 chairs in the defined zone, of what that layout would be. So basically having blocks with the chairs set out in pairs, and we're proposing that there be sufficient spacing for social distancing and also just making sure that there's not a crowded sort of effect. In terms of commercial units, based on the vending zone that was presented, and I think I forgot to mention the fact that there are also 2 small units that would be included on the eastern end of the beach to specifically accommodate water sport operations. We're looking at a total of 8 to 11 commercial operators on the beach. So 3 bar/restaurant operations, 2 water sport operators, and then anywhere between 3 to 6 vendors. And that's variable because it really depends on the specific leasing arrangements for those small units, including the fact that those units could potentially be split and leased by 2 persons and sharing the unit. Public restrooms, we intend to keep the capacity as it is, but like I said, enhance the facility. In order to make sure that the facility is not overwhelmed or overcrowded, we've calculated the service rate for the facility and suggest how that means that tourist arrivals need to be slightly staggered to make sure that the restroom is not overwhelmed. So we're looking at accommodating the total of 450 persons as a carrying capacity over about a 1.5-hour window. And then the last few slides on the beach management measures. Again, in this concept of sharing the beach, we think there's a really good opportunity for the beach to be shared in a time-wise fashion, where during the weekdays when persons are primarily out to work, it would be more of a tourism-dominated environment where there wouldn't be any limits on the taxi tour buses beyond sticking within the carrying capacity that we've proposed. But we're suggesting that on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, when the beach is in highest demand by the public, and it's really the public's opportunity to use the beach, that we look at imposing some restrictions, not on tourist arrivals, but specifically on taxi tour buses, which is the means by which tourists would be arriving in large numbers. So we're suggesting here options for consideration by the public. And again, we're taking comments up until the 15th of November, so we're not here to necessarily make a decision tonight, but to hear views. So the first option being that the beach would be closed to taxi tour buses on weekends. The second option being that we would keep it open on a Saturday, closed on a Sunday, and this could be the flip way around, so open on a Sunday but closed on a Saturday. And then the third option suggested being that we look at opening on both Saturdays and Sundays to taxi tour buses, but up until a cutoff point. And suggested here is 1 p.m. in consideration of the fact that the public use is typically greatest in the afternoon period. So please, those are options for consideration, and we will be happy to take feedback tonight. In terms of sharing the beach from the perspective of the beach chair operations, again, balancing the fact that we're suggesting to keep the chairs at 400, and the survey data expressed a strong view to see that number reduced, we've sought to offset that by making sure that when the public is there to use the beach on the weekends, that those chairs don't take up the seashore, or that large part of it, which should really be available for public use. So we're seeking to suggest that there be no rentals of beach chairs on the weekends, and we did a economic analysis to try to get an appreciation of what the impact of that proposal would be. So you're looking at data for the 2023 cruise ship arrivals, and what you're seeing here is basically the percentage of days that cruise ship passengers arrive on a Saturday and a Sunday. So you can see it fluctuates throughout the year, where some months don't have any arrivals on Saturdays and Sundays at all. But the takeaway here is that balanced or averaged over the course of the year, the number of cruise ship passengers arriving on a Saturday and Sunday combined is 10% of total arrivals. So the takeaway for the committee from this is that there wouldn't be a significant impact to that activity by implementing this policy. We also consider the fact that the beach chair operators also engage in other commercial activity on the beach as well. So I don't want to go too much longer. I'll probably do this very succinctly, just to say that there are 3 categories of rules. Some activities that are just outright prohibited, so things like cutting vegetation. Some activities requiring permission, like I said before, use of the beach, including for non-commercial purposes if there are going to be more than 50 persons, or if a loudspeaker would be used. And actions that would be required by users. So I'll use the beach chairs as another example. Essentially, that beach chair should be immediately removed from the shoreline when not in use. And this is actually embedded in the Virgin Islands Beach Use Policy of 2020. So the final note on implementation, while this is a proposed national park, it's not declared as yet. So that means that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor would continue to serve as the managers of the beach until such declaration is finalized, and we'll be using a combination of mechanisms to ensure success, everything from public education to enforcement of relevant legislation. There are already existing application and approval mechanisms which we will continue to enforce, including for long-term vending as well as temporary commercial use of the beach and non-commercial use. We'll be ramping up our monitoring mechanisms of the beach, monitoring the environment, the facilities, as well as persons' adherence to rules. And then final slide, the timeline for all of this. We're actively working to secure the budget as a part of this year's budgeting cycle so that we can start implementation in January, and we're looking at basically a year-long implementation period, targeting being able to open up that vending zone for the next tourism season. So the construction of those units we're targeting for the end of October, I think it is, and then the environmental restoration, which happens over 2 phases. We're looking at the initial input being done by the end of next year. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. Like I promised you, this is the link that you can go to download the full plan and study it, and you're welcome to submit any written comments to this email address. We will be monitoring that account for comments. So thank you for your great attention. I saw people, I didn't see any nodding heads. So thank you for being attentive, and at this time, Mr. Marvin Hastings, where is he? He's going to assist in moderating the discussion. I think he just wants to make some few points of guidance before we begin so that persons appreciate the topics that we will be here to address and try to keep the conversation focused. So, well, haven't given the details. So Mr. Hastings, and then I'll, myself together with the team, so there are a number of persons here from the ministry who will assist me in providing responses to questions.
Good evening, everyone. As Angela has so brilliantly said, that we're going to really try tonight to focus in on the questions that we want to get from you, the audience tonight. Certain questions like who's going to be here, who's going to be there, which vendor is getting this spot and that spot. We haven't gotten to that decision as yet. But so we just want to bear in mind that it's still a working plan. And as Angela said, not until next year are we planning to get these facilities built, and then the government and the committee at the time will then decide which vendors are going to go where and there. So we don't know that question as yet. So with that said, for the listening audience online as well, we're asking you to also write in your comments, and we'll try to monitor those as well. And I'll try to walk around to members in the audience as they ask their question. So we can start right now if we want to. Mr. Penn? Sorry, let me get it over here.
Yeah, good evening. I wanted to be the first to congratulate the ministry and the team on obviously a tremendous amount of work that they've done. I see a lot of very good thoughts have gone into it, and it is very clear that I guess the ministry listened to the preliminary conversations and engagement on the subject. I have a couple of points and perhaps one concern, and I was jotting down some notes while you were speaking, Angela, so permit me to refer to them. In terms of the plan, it seems pretty excellent to me. There are slight concerns, I'm sure, in particular the vendors are going to have, but the principle of what you're trying to achieve and the way you're going about it, I strongly welcome and endorse it. And I think that's important to say. The slight concerns that I have first. One, whether or not there is scope for bringing the beach vendors closer. The spatial plan has them, I think, set back pretty far from the beach, and then there's a sort of buffer zone on the sand dune before the vegetation regrowth, and whether or not there might be scope for bringing the vendors further up in that zone in front of them. The primary reason being that, from my experience, the vendors are serving very heavily a target market and audience that's sitting out on those beach chairs and so forth. So for, I think, ease of service, efficiency, and so forth, to try to provide a good product, some consideration may be given to whether or not they could be brought forward, because there is, just from the bird's eye view, quite a bit of space there in between the vegetation regrowth and the dune. So that's one comment. The other is, I think perhaps you're probably going to need some more barbecue areas. I think you yourself mentioned the prevalence of barbecuing that has been happening, and I think two only down on the further end may not be sufficient. The points about noise pollution, I think, concern me a little bit. Noise pollution is an important issue, but for me, if you're trying to manage noise pollution on the basis of moral inclinations, I would say, points about vulgar music and traditional holidays that are attached to religious holidays and so on and so forth, I think there has to be an appreciation that some of us like spending traditional holidays in a different way. So I don't think that that should be the driver. Fully on board with the point about noise pollution, but I think we should stay away from the moral and religious arguments to support it. And the regrowth. I visit the beach often, and there's significant regrowth already down on that eastern dune. The protection, I think, is absolutely awesome. I like the aesthetics of the protection. But just to make the point that that regrowth has to be properly managed, otherwise it's going to get away already. If you look at where it is right now after that little bit of rain, it's almost out of hand. You had a number of specific questions that you say you're going to try to get answered. One of my suggestions would be is to get them out in a survey, because as you were ending the presentation, there were some very good and clear questions that you need answering. I think getting them out in a survey is important. And the final point, which is probably the most important point that I want to make, is the implementation plan. The timeline is aggressive, as history goes in terms of how we do things here in the BVI, probably unrealistic. But I think very importantly, it needs to have a transition plan that is coordinated with that time frame. Because the reality is, if you are going to displace the vendors who have now become a fabric of the beach, very important for the tourism area and so forth, a clear transition plan needs to happen. I personally have my doubts in terms of the time frame. We're heading into an election. All kind of promises are going to be made. We have potential issues in terms of budgeting. This is going to be a huge undertaking unless there is private sector funding. So I have my skepticism in terms of the timeline. And so I think it's going to be important that there is a transition plan that coincides with that timeline, so that the livelihoods of the vendors and the beach users are not unduly impacted if there is a lack of realism in terms of implementing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Penn. That was a lot of feedback, so I'm going to try my best to recall all the points and address them with the help of the team. Before I respond, I do want to recognize the presence of Honorable Flax Charles, who has joined us. Thank you for being here. So, colleagues, you can feel free to jump in, Marvin. You can probably keep the mic on that side, but it looks like you might want to say something first, so let me allow you.
You can start.
Okay. So I think the first point you raised was the location of the vending zone and whether we can bring it forward. So I think this really was the focus, if I can say, of maybe the first round of consultations. And we spent a lot of time at that meeting trying to explain the science. This is proven environmental science as to why we're not suggesting moving this any further forward. In fact, this point was a compromise point from the ministry's perspective. Not only is it important to make sure that the beach is protected and there in the future, we have to appreciate that the environment, the dynamics are changing. We have sea level rise happening. If we want to have a beach 50 years from now, that beach needs somewhere to migrate and go to. It's not going to hold that same line that it's at now. So just from an environmental protection perspective, we can't consider bringing this forward any further, and even from the perspective of making sure that the investment itself is well protected, it makes sense to have it set back. The other thing is that the challenges you talked about from a vendor perspective, we've considered those in our discussions, but we feel like those are challenges that could be fairly easily surmounted by changes in operational practices. I think from the ministry's perspective, our main focus has to be on making sure that we protect a resource so that the vendors can benefit from over time. So we have to prioritize protection of the environment. And I should also say that while on a map, looking at this from an overhead view, it might seem like a big space. I would encourage anybody to go out there and actually walk it, actually be in the space. You can, if I remember my numbers correctly, I think this area is only about 30 meters or so from the sea grape line. So it's not a far space. That's about, what, a third of a 100-meter dash. You can walk from this point to that point in about 30 seconds. It's really not a big separation. And you do have a clear line of sight from this point out to the beach. In fact, as you move along the arch, of course, the views become even better. And we talked about the restoration percentage being relaxed, and part of that is to make sure that in this space in particular, we can introduce and include building some wider view channels out to sea so that it's easier to maintain that view. So we have started to consider that feedback from the first meeting, but within the parameters that we, as environmental scientists, know make sense to maintain the beach. We also talked about elevating the units a bit, and that's to help enhance that view. So that was the first point. On the barbecue pits, we do recognize that there's a high demand for this. I do want to just remind persons that this is a new activity, meaning that before about 2016 or so, when this space became cleared out for the first time, that activity really never existed. So it's something that has recently developed, and we realize it's something that needs to be properly managed. So it does have some degree of environmental impact, things like coals being left in the sand, soil in the sand. It also introduces the risk of fire, which would significantly impact the dune system. There are also potential impacts like odors and smoke and so forth from that activity. So again, we have to make sure that the use by these users is not unduly impacting use by others. And so we're not saying that it might never grow more than 2, but we want to start at what we think is a reasonable and manageable starting point. The idea is that we will be monitoring the success of this plan over time and would make the necessary adjustments. So if we see that the spaces are being well used, well respected, and not creating an undue impact, then we might then look at expanding the number of built-in pits. And by saying that there are 2 pits doesn't necessarily mean that there would only be 2 cooking spaces. Each pit, for example, might have the ability to accommodate 2 sets of persons cooking or using it at a time. So I hope that clarifies on that point. I'm trying to remember what the other points were. Can you just remind me quickly? The vegetation, yes. So this is an important point to clarify. And Marvin, I'll maybe let you speak a little more on this. But yes, there are trees coming back in this space. But it's important to highlight that a lot of the trees that are coming back there are not native to the beach. And not only are they not native, they're invasive. So the neem tree in particular is a dominant species that's coming back in here. It's not a tree that adds value to this ecosystem in any way. And it's actually a species that we're going to be seeking to eliminate. So persons have asked, for example, about the impact of us building in this space. What's in this space right now is neem trees and other secondary, non-native, non-original trees that add no value to the beach ecosystem and that we'll be wanting to remove in any event to restore all of the other native species that add ecosystem value. So meaning, for example, that they help to contribute to wildlife habitat, bird habitat, etc. Mr. Penn, I don't know if I caught all of the points, but I think the suggestion of having a survey is certainly a good suggestion, and it's something that we've talked about preliminarily. So I think that it makes sense, and it's something that we look into doing just to get a pulse on some of the main points that we're seeking feedback on.
I think we have a question over Angela. What? Oh, sorry.
Sure.
The point about ensuring that there's a transition plan for failing of aggressive implementation plan.
I'll let my minister respond to that.
The minister will respond. And one thing I learned, and this is not to be facetious in any way, but one thing I learned a long time ago, even before politics, especially being from the western end of the island, when somebody from Eastern and Langlook gaining something, keep out. So look at this. Look at God. We're in his house. The premier is the minister of finance from the 7th district. The minister of health is the minister responsible for Lang Beach from the 8th district. All I have to do is tell them, listen, we need the money. They're going to figure it out for I keep it out. That's on the facetious side. But on a serious note, I believe what this plan would be able to do as is being finalized, the drawings and everything from Public Works Department and all the persons on the TRC who have been involved, we're getting it costed to see how we could push it, TCP, sorry. Well, the Technical Review Committee as well. How we could cost it and see how it could be done, because what exists now is a beach that is operational. So even if it is not all done at the same time, for example, the very pegs, what do you call them, the borders, we have already moved towards with electricity to have those start to be in place within the next few weeks, so that persons will stop driving in there and parking. So it is a phase approach, but the Minister of Finance is here, and it would be a transitional period, but I don't think necessarily that we would have to, if you look at it from doing it holistically, I don't think we would have to have any vendors come off the property to be able to have, it can be done transitionally as we go in. Given all the facets that you said, Mr. Penn, in terms of the budget coming up and everything but this is important to help the future development, because we anticipate much more cruise ships during this tourist season. King Garden Bay, Bruce Bay, and all the other beaches going to hold so much. So it's a balancing act that must be created. But again, this is done for the future, and I believe I would have the commitment and no question whatsoever between the two ministers and representatives on my left. I come good?
You want to hold that first? I do. We do. Ask Mr. Penn. Hold on, give me 1 second. Give me 1 second.
The police department actually uses that system, how it is, to patrol the beach and keep security on the beach. When you considering closing it off, you have to go and have a consultation with them, because in its present state, they have a better access to the beach to actually patrol it.
Well, I'll tell you something right now. You would have seen the minister put out a press release last week. And one of the problems we're having with Long Bay lately is right in this area right here, we've noticed that individuals in the community or on island, whoever, has been going and been doing sand mining. They've been mining the sand. So what this is going to do, they're taking the sand away from the beach. So a way to prevent that right now, Mr. Penn, Clavito, is that
Please, guys, 1 meter.
one of the reasons we're trying to do that immediately is to prevent the sand mining. People removing sand right now, especially in this zone right here. It's really going on really bad. And that too can affect the sand on the beach, as you know. But we will take in your point into consideration. And because, believe it or not, the Royal Vigilance Police is a part of our technical review committee, and they sit on our board as well. So the whole point of this whole plan is that this is not a ministry's plan. We've involved, as Angela said and the minister said, all of the relevant government departments in formalizing this plan. It's not an isolated plan within the ministry alone. So, all right, I think we had a question from Mr. Penn over here in the corner.
Well, thank you, Marvin, and good night, everyone. And I'm not going to be long this time on the mic, guys. Angela told me the last time. I just wanted to find out a little bit, follow up on Penn's question. What his name is? But, yeah. So if y'all could actually show us a little bit of where these proposed the red zone is in terms of where it's actually going to be now, because it's a little confusing to see on the beach. And my second point would be, if these huts or whatever eventually get built, if y'all could, instead of using galvanized for the roofs, that we use thatched roof, because to me that will really make the thatched roof blend into the environment. As y'all can see, as I mentioned the last time, you go to all those rich people places, that's what they're using. You go to Cancun, they're using thatched roof. That was the original, structure that people used to use. You go right there looking, when you pass there, Hodges Creek, you look across the Buck Island, they have thatched roof on the huts right on the beach. So please use thatched roof for the structures. Please.
All right, Angela, can you go to the, do we have an aerial shot of the bay? Looking down?
But just to be clear, you're trying to get a better appreciation of where this red zone is?
So I was asking if you can go to a shot. That's pretty much. Yeah. Mr. Penn, do you know where the current bathroom facilities are?
Yes. So is it being in that area?
It's.
Yeah. So let me show it to you in relation to the restrooms. The location of the restroom symbol is actually matching the restrooms on the ground right now. So if you were to basically cross over the little access road, right off to the right of that, if you're looking out to sea, would be the start of the zone. And it goes out on this curve. I think the entire length, I don't want to misspeak, I think it's around 200 feet or so.
But 250, 300
On an
feet,
arc?
we measured it. This road actually exists already, Mr. Penn. Well, not a road. The path already exists right there. So what we did is we followed the natural path that's there already.
And the thatch roof suggestion, that's something that we can take into consideration. We'd have to discuss it with Public Works that's looking at the structural side of things. I do want to highlight, though, that we want to make sure that whatever we build on this beach is as resilient as possible so that it can withstand Cat 4, even Cat 5 events. The huts that are out here are very similar in design to the ones on the edge of the Pier Park, and we see that those were tested and survived well in Hurricane Irma. So we're hoping that with a similar sort of design, we would have a similar effect here. But that's something we can discuss and see whether that would fit within.
Any more questions?
The thatch is really just a decorative cover. What you put underneath of that, now with the hurricane clips or whatever you need to do, the thatch will survive. You also have the natural thatch and you have the artificial. The artificial one, it looks the same, but that lasts for about 30 years or so, as opposed to maybe 10 to 15 years for the natural thatch. But it's really just a decorative look, and I do agree with Mr. Penn that would be a beautiful look for the beach.
Yeah, well, certainly from an aesthetic point of view, I think we can easily agree, so we'll look into that suggestion.
All right, hold on. We have another question.
I just have a couple questions and maybe good night. Why is there such a heavy-handed policy on renting beach chairs on the weekend?
So if you recall the slide on carrying capacity, one, we are suggesting that the number of chairs remain at the existing level, which is about 400 chairs. As a part of our public survey, the one commercial activity that flagged as an area of dissatisfaction was beach chairs. And the most common response was that people were saying they want to see either less or no beach chairs at all. So we've not proposed to reduce the number of chairs, but clearly the concern that people are expressing is that when they go to the beach, the seashore, that is really a common good, a common space, is not available to them, and they want to have it available, which I think is a right. So at the moment, with the beach chair zone at 400 chairs, I'm trying to find the slide again, but we're looking at that taking up a significant share of the eastern side of the beach. I think it's 75% of the eastern side of the beach and 60% of the width. So therefore, we're saying that this is fine on the weekdays when persons are not out at the beach, but on the weekends when the public wants to use the beach, we're suggesting that the seashore should be fully open for the public to use the beach.
So what I meant was they could be available for rental. They don't have to be lined out on the beach.
Well, they're never supposed to be lined out on the beach.
But you said
in keeping with the policy
for no rental.
Right, so the
Or
idea
is there a policy for it not to be lined out on the beach?
The suggestion that we're making, and again, this is for feedback, the suggestion that we're making is that there be no rental so that the beach shore is fully available for public use. We've gone to the beach as a team on the weekends individually.
If I could just interject. What I'm saying is that, to me, that's heavy-handed. You can have a vendor on the beach with their chairs stocked and stored, and I can walk up and rent one chair that I can have on the beach. So I'm saying the beach doesn't have to be lined with chairs on the weekend. I don't like it either. But the option must be available. I mean, to say no rental, if you're understanding what I'm saying.
We understand that point of view, and that's certainly a view I'm sure some persons will express, and that's why we're having this conversation. Like I said, we sought to assess what the economic impact of it would be, and it's very minimal. We also note that beach chairs are not really used by residents. It's really something that are used by tourists, and that's one of the reasons that we're proposing.
We love them at King Garden, but we use them.
The final point I'll make on this, The final point I'll make on this is that we also have to consider the management. We have to consider the management capacity. We have to consider the management capacity, meaning that if we're going to propose a specific number be allowed to be rented, there has to be a way to then enforce that. So that's the final point I want to make around the suggestion here. But again, this is something for public feedback, and I think it would be a sensible approach for us to take the perspective of the wider public, and maybe this is one of the points that we can look at in potentially including in a public survey on these specific points.
Okay, just if I can just finish. I didn't see an indication of operation time.
Of a what, sorry?
Operation time on the beach, like for vendors. Can we have one meeting?
I know we don't want to belabor this, we don't want to fix it here, but I think what the vendors are actually saying, why a second meeting is going on, is that the use of the beach chairs on the weekend is also necessary. Maybe not at the extent, and particularly even for locals, because every time they move their chairs, the locals are cussing them and saying, why you move them and so forth. So we have to make some provision, particularly to be able to facilitate locals on weekends to utilize the beach chairs.
No, to both Cindy and Mr. Penn and the vendors, I believe it's an important point that you're making, because while the original policy, what we want to do is ensure that the chairs are removed and stored after the end of each day, based on the beach use policy. But I believe there needs to be a clear availability. If persons, because for example, if I come on the beach on a Sunday with my family, I might want a beach chair, and the vendor should be allowed to be able to do that. So I don't think it should just be absolutely not. I think the option has to be available for us going forward. So that suggestion is welcome, and I agree with it.
And as Angela is saying, that's why we're here. Nothing that we're saying here is 100% in concrete. That's why we're having public consultation right now. You have another point, Mr. Penn?
Yeah, Ms. Penn has a concept that we kind of bar the public from using our stuff. On a Sunday, we are overrun by the public wanting to use our chairs. And the big argument usually is whether they're paying for it or not. Whether they're paying for it or not, they occupy it. And on a Sunday, even if I had 100 chairs and I picked them up before 11 o'clock in the day, I got to put back out the same 100 chairs because they want to use it and use it for free.
So we can move on from that.
Okay, so again, this is a point, we've observed several times those chairs empty, but you're a vendor, you would be there all the time and maybe have a better appreciation. So this is a point, again, that we're probably going to take some more feedback on. We appreciate that the room probably doesn't represent the full community, so we'll take more poll on this. I think there was a question in the, no, I think there was a hand in the back of the room. Was there a hand in the back of the room?
Let me ask my first. This is a real experience that I have. It's going to sound a bit strange, but which has more rights, me or the chair? Because multiple times I went to different beaches. There's a chair there, right? In a nice shady spot, and I want to have that spot. If I try to move the chair, the vendor going to tell me the chair was there first. So that's where the confusion comes in. Who has more rights? The member of the public or the chair?
So
Go ahead.
I just want to say in response to that's perhaps one of the reasons why the beach policy says that beach chairs are not supposed to be just out on the beach like furniture hanging out. Beach chairs are supposed to be put out on demand and removed immediately after use. That's not something that we're proposing in relation to Long Bay. That's something that's already in the beach policy that is approved by Cabinet since 2020 that applies to all beaches. We've not seen it well enforced, but this is something that we need to focus on enforcement on going forward. Well, exactly, and that's against the policy. So that's something that we need to do more education on and have better compliance with. So you shouldn't have to be fighting with a beach chair. You should have the first right to that space. So that's part of the conversation and part of the education. Okay? So I think that. So I think there's another question in the room.
I would like to applaud the team that put this together. I really love this. I love the addition with the board watching. I really love that also. I see the protection that you're going to put in with the lamp poles and all of that. But I don't see the protection for the beach itself. Not only Long Bay Beach, but all the beaches of the BVI. Is there a plan for that in terms of the climate change that we are going through today? Secondly, I think galvalume would be the better thing to put on top of them hut. Galvalume would be the best thing to put on top of them. Yeah. They are a little too small though. They need a little more size for commercial.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last point. What is too small?
They're saying, well, one of the things, Angela, can you go back to that slide? One of the things that we did do is, one of the reasons that we did use Public Works and...
Which slide?
Go back to the slides, but this one, that shows the stuff that can fit inside. That can fit inside. What kind of stuff can fit inside? So believe it or not, these are actual measurements, these are actual dimensions of actual kitchen equipment. They were not just put in there. That's why they're strategically placed like that. And we visited the bigger ones at the Pear Park, and we've looked at the facilities, and we actually measured them. So believe it or not, the 16 by 16 frame that you're looking at fits all of this equipment. You see a stove, a deep fryer, a grill, a freezer, a fridge, and dry storage, and the rest you see within that contained area. And you still have prep room outside to serve as a bar outside.
Of course.
Yes, of course it fits. All right. Has anyone been to just? Go ahead, Minister. You want to make a comment?
I hear you. I hear you, Mr. Balat, right? And so I'm gonna just draw a reference to something that happened in my district, right? We were talking about the bathroom being built in Bruce Bay, and people like, I gotta walk all the way down from one end of the bed to go to the bathroom. Where are you going to the bathroom now? So I understand the point that's making it. What we're trying to do is we're trying to introduce something, because here's the plan. The plan is we're introducing these vendor stalls, but it does not mean that those are going to be the only vendor stalls. If the demand, if further development is needed, those are things that could be added on. But what we're trying to do, and I understand the argument that by we seen it look too small, you gotta go a little bigger. And then when you get bigger, Lord, I got too much space here. Let me see if I can bust it down in two. So what we're trying to do is the vendor stalls are two sizes: it's 10 by 10 and 16 by 16. But the 16 by 16, based on my understanding of what was presented, is to be able to have the food vendors and the smoothies, and then the smaller vendors will be able to serve your drinks and your different what do you call them? Souvenirs or whatever the case may be. So that's the idea. It is not perfect. You might see it a different way, but that's at least the proposed plan that we hope to develop. And then once it's developed and put out there, if there's need for more, then we can always add on. But doing nothing right now, I think is not the right thing.
I think it's really important not to dismiss the views of the vendors in particular on things like this, because I work sometimes for free, Clavy, in a kitchen up there. Derek does, Cornell does, right? And when you look at the width of the kitchen, it is 8 feet 6 inches, 8 feet 6 inches wide. A typical kitchen equipment is about 30 inches deep. So you take 30 inches on one side and 30 inches on the next, you're left with 3 foot 6 inches to navigate. So between cooks and preps and so forth, spinning around in there, it really isn't enough. I appreciate that the footprint can't go too big, but I think some serious consideration have to go into actually increasing the sizes of those areas. Similarly, so for even the smaller ones, if you think about some of the additional vendors up there, especially people like the t-shirts and the craft vendors and so on and so forth, in terms of having the physical space to be able to hang their wares, display them and so forth, they're going to be small. I think some consideration have to go into making them a little bit bigger.
Brady, I hear you and I respect your view. Size matters, as they say. So whether it is for consideration to add additional 2 inches or 4 inches, but I'll give you an example. That's neither here nor there. That's simply something that can be discussed and addressed and then just amended. So it is what is proposed now. So if when we go to 20 feet by 20 feet, then you say we want more, then I think you're going too far. But we're willing to have the discussion and the input from you. So is there, but it's not set in stone based on what we're trying to achieve.
I just want to remind persons of what I indicated in the presentation, which is this is just a sample of what somebody might do with the space. This will be rented as a shell, and the internal arrangement, including the amount of space given to the bar area versus the kitchen, that's a determination for the vendor to make. How what equipment would be in the kitchen. This is like a fully maxed out kitchen with all of the potential equipment. So what equipment you might have and how you would arrange it, that's also for the vendor to decide. And I just want to remind people that I think the Pear Park is a perfect example for us to take our minds to. You have several full functioning kitchens in a 10 by 10 space. So it is doable. Well, there will be electricity facilities as a part of the provisioning for these units, water and electricity. I'm just saying that we have to appreciate that we're operating in a beach environment. We have to respect the fact that we need to prioritize protection of the environment, and part of that means limiting the footprint that we take up with development as much as possible, maintaining the natural aesthetic. And I think we have to just think a little more creatively about how we get around some of the operational challenges, which we can be creative and flexible about, okay? So I just want to leave you with that thought, but we're welcome to take additional feedback on this, including written comments.
Ms. Penn, my bar on the beach is an actual container, and with a freezer at 3 foot, I barely have nearly like 29 inches of walk space inside the bar at 20 by 9.8. That's something that even with the size of your kitchen that you need to consider. 20 foot long, but 9 feet wide. And you barely have 28 inches of walk space in between equipment and counter.
So again, I'm saying that this is not set in stone. Persons can adjust the internal arrangement of this space. This was just set as a sample to show that the equipment can fit. And I forget the specific width between. It's actually about 3.5 foot, I think, from side to side, which can serve as a functional kitchen.
No, I have 2 more questions.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, guys.
No, I just wanted to make the point that I think the most important factor in this consideration is the ratio between the bar space and the kitchen space is subject to change. There's nothing that says that the kitchen has to be this width and the bar has to be that width. So I think that's the most important consideration to keep in mind.
All right, I think we have a question from...
I just had 2 more questions. I didn't see, unless I missed it, an indication of operation time for the vendors or the use of the beach.
Yeah. So what's the other question?
The other question is that I want to indicate that there are some things that I see that the public pushed back on, but they still kind of ended up in your plan. So I wanted to know, given transparency, can we have access to your research on this and access to the survey results, redacting, of course, people's private information, so we can review if we'd like to?
Okay, thank you for those questions. I'll deal first with the opening time of the beach, but I'll get back to the overall spatial plan to address the second question. So in terms of the opening times of the beach, this was discussed by the committee, and we're proposing 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There might be some flexibility in that 9 a.m. start. We've already gotten feedback that we might need to consider a slightly earlier opening time, especially during the weekdays, which is something that can be considered. So again, this is one of the points of feedback that we're seeking. We do want to consider the fact in that, though, that there is quite a large segment of the community that uses that beach in the early hours of the morning, and that use needs to be given some consideration. So the 5 p.m., can I just finish and then I'll take the question? I was saying that right now the suggested opening time of the beach is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Sorry, I shouldn't say the opening time of the beach for the vending activity on the beach. I'm saying that the 9 a.m. start time is something that we're willing to adjust as necessary, because we've already gotten some feedback that we might need to consider an earlier opening time, especially on weekdays. Okay, so that's something that we can take some feedback from now. So we can take some feedback on what would be suggested. Again, part of this is that we want to give consideration.
Norwegian Cruise Line visit the BVI from 4 a.m. and leaves at 1. That ain't even practical in terms of opening time for the beach.
So what would be the normal time
unless
that you
the ministry
open?
gonna dictate policy to Norwegian from 6 to 6, that ain't practical.
What is the
Because
typical time that you would
at 6
open?
o'clock, most of the vendors prepare for when they ship board at 6. Most of the vendors are actually preparing for people at 7:30, the latest, as far back as 3:30 in the afternoon. So these are things that you need to consider when you're making a time for the old starters.
So that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
So the
That's why we're
question
here.
that I'm asking you is, I understand that you would have to be there from earlier than opening time to prepare, but as is for, and I think that's probably the earliest arrival, what time would you actually open your operations to the tourists?
7, 6.
I deal with a lot of locals, that come to the beach to swim. And when I'm not there at 6:30, 7 to even serve breakfast, they're upset with me. They end up going up by Loose Mangoose to do breakfast.
So are you proposing 6 o'clock? Yes, we're actually recording what people are saying, so that's why we want the mic, okay?
This morning, Norwegian had guests on the beach from about 7 o'clock. Okay, and there's drivers that actually on tour from like 6:30 in the morning.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, so you're suggesting we look at something like a 7 a.m., adjusting the 9 a.m. to 7 a.m., Mr. Penn? 6 a.m. Okay, so we've noted that feedback.
If I may, I must agree with the opening times need to be early. This morning I left Virgin Gorda at 7 a.m. When we got by the bluff, one of Romney's boats, that boat holds probably about 80 people. They were passing us at the bluff, going to Virgin Gorda. So if you're operating a food and beverage business, there's some prep that is involved. And so even if you're going to open at 7, you need to be there at 6, 5:30 to make sure that you prep, because you're dealing with food and you have to make sure that temperatures, etc., right, and all of that. We have to be able to adjust to what the industry is demanding. And a lot of the cruise ships are coming in very early, and so you need to be able to be in place when they get there. They might not buy a drink until 10 o'clock. However, I've seen situations at the baths, you have somebody that comes down at 7:30, and is a diabetic, and they have an issue, and they need a can of Coke or something sweet to do whatever they need to do. And so we need to think about all of these things. But we cannot think in a bubble. We have to think about how the cruise ships operate, how the villa, the guests in the villa and in the hotels and so forth operate, and we have to cater to them. and the charter boats for sure. So we have to cater to what those guests are really doing and what times they are coming out for a drink, a meal, etc.
We have
Okay, so
another
this is
question here,
certainly
Angela.
one of the points that we'll seek to adjust in the plan. No, it was the same 5 p.m. So part of that, or was it 6? It might have been 6 p.m. Sorry, I might be misspeaking. I think we were looking at 6 p.m. So part of the reason that we're not proposing a later close time, we're trying to operate with a natural sunset. This is a turtle nesting beach. I think that's part of the factors that have to be remembered here. And light on the beach has a major impact on turtle nesting activity. And also just trying to, again, respect the fact that the public is saying to us that they want to see this beach not become dominated by commercial activity, but to allow it in a balanced way. So we think the commercial activities that has evolved over the last 5 years has been operating within that time frame, and it's reasonable to suggest that that's the time frame that be continued.
Okay, added to what the Honorable Lady said, you have to get there really early because you have a lot of cleaning up to do. The people who use the beach, after we leave, they leave everything dirty. Under your tent filled with garbage, you got to clean up all of that. We have to be able to set some bins up, within reasonable space for people to be able to throw their garbage in. They cook, they leave everything around the beach. I also was going to ask a question. Did I hear you say that the development will commence at the end of this October here?
No, so to just clarify the timeline, we're
Yes,
currently
please.
working on securing the funding within this budgeting cycle. We're looking at starting implementation of the plan in January. It is an aggressive timeline, Mr. Penn, but I've seen where there's the will and the funding available, it's not an unfeasible timeline. So it can happen in terms from a construction perspective. It can happen within that timeline. We know that this beach has been in this state for a long time now. We know that there's a desire both on the side of the government as well as on the side of vendors to see some immediate improvements. So we're trying to respond to that urgency by getting it done on a tight timeline. So we're looking at trying to have it open for the next tourist season by having the structures completed at the end of October.
So that shouldn't impact those of us who are along there until
No,
we get
but
it
the
done.
intention is not to go and immediately displace persons, but to have a natural transition once those spaces are completed. She's left the room now, but I do want to address the point that Ms. Roseanne raised about how we've integrated feedback from the first rounds of consultation, because I think it is important for the public to know that we are taking the public feedback seriously, and we have made several adjustments to the spatial plan in respect of the comments that were made at the first round of meetings, including adjusting the lunch area for the water sports zone, which is something that I failed to point out in the presentation, but that's now down on the eastern end of the beach, and that's where you see these units to support the water sport activity on this side of the beach. Another adjustment that we made was the inclusion of this outdoor eating area overlapping with the vending zone, as opposed to having the picnic zone run along the entire length of the beach or the eastern side of the dune. Another thing that we looked at was even adjusting the configuration of the picnic zone itself. So we have really tried to take public feedback into consideration. In terms of transparency, the full plan document is available on the website. It does explain the methodologies that we used, including for calculating things like carrying capacity. And the survey data is fully available on that website as well. So you can go there, you can see all of the details about, of course, no personal names will be given. We don't even know who responded to the survey. It was anonymous. But we do have the demographic data, so you can go and see who responded. Like I said, we had 300 respondents, and from a statistical perspective, that gives us a fairly high level of confidence in the results. A survey is never meant to capture everybody in a community. It's meant to capture a representative sample. And at 300 respondents, based on our population level, that's about a 95% confidence level in those results. So the data is there, and it's available for anybody to look at.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn the mic back over to the permanent secretary within the ministry to close the meeting for us. closing time. You can say it.
Okay. Yes, sorry for, we don't mean to cut this off, but there is a period still until November 15th where we can accept comments in writing at nrl@gov.vg, so that's our ministry's website. Sure.
Yeah, thanks for the intervention, sir. I just want to say is that we have been kind of concentrating mostly on the economic side in terms of the vendors and so, but as Angela said in her presentation, one of the big things is putting back the grape trees. And so far, nobody has really talked about that. I know when we did have a meeting a couple of months ago, after that, Minis had donated, I think, 4 grape trees. But, those are trees just like a foot, 12 inches tall. What I'm trying to propose there now is that hopefully in this new budget, you would instead really aim to get mature grape trees, like maybe 6 feet or even taller, so that you could try and really restore the beachfront quickly. Because you can't, the grape trees are going to take years to grow from 12 inches. Hopefully we won't have any hurricane that will come and, kill up the big trees. But, that's just how the nature would be. So either we have to source these mature trees from either here locally or from Florida or something. But we need to do that.
Thank you. So, can you guys pass the mute?
Letting it slide. Miss Penn and yourself knocked me the last meeting we had. I box up 2 trees, and you guys complain and tell me I destroying the trees. Go on the beach and see the amount of growth and grapes that are on those 2 trees. Those trees were preserved from 2017 by my hands, and go and look at them. You guys need to take grafts from these trees and start making plants for the actual grape tree line. A couple of months ago you came and you said we're going to create a garden area where we can start grafting some of the species of plants and start to concentrate and pull back the tree line. Nothing has been done. All it is talk. Please, stop mamagaing us with a plan, and you himself in for the actual tree line that you want to put back needs to be done now. And then 2 years into that project, then you can start talking about a plan to relocate and redraft the beach. Because that's the actual important part that needs to be done now.
Okay, I want to respond to those 2, but I'll take Mr. Penn's.
Yeah, mine is going to be quicker because I know you're trying to close out the meeting. We addressed the opening time, but we didn't address the closing time, save for your views on it. So, I mean, in the interest of time, I think it's something that we actually have to put in the survey, the closing time, because I think that there are different permutations that can happen in nesting season. Restrictions with lighting, restrictions with sound and music and so on and so forth. But I think it's a bit unfair to say that I can't go on the beach beyond 6 o'clock and buy a drink and cool out my head. So I think we need to talk about the closing time.
All right, Angela, do you reply and I will.
Okay, so first to Mr. Penn's question on how we intend to deal with the sea grape tree restoration. The point is fully taken. So our plan really is to do a mixed approach. We're looking to partner with HLSCC to expand on the effort that they've already started with the mangrove nursery to have our own sea grape tree nursery, not just to serve Long Bay, but any other beach in the future that we might need to do restoration on. But agreed, in order to have some immediate restoration effect, there's a part of the budget allocated to dealing with environmental restoration, including the sea grape tree restoration, and we're looking at procuring some mature trees for planting in order to have some immediate effect. But we'll be doing that in a phased approach because this would be, to my knowledge at least, the first time we'll be doing such a large-scale restoration effort on a beach, so we'll be doing it in a phased approach. Mr. Penn, it seems like every time we have a meeting, you invent another conversation that you and I never had. But
that's okay.
But Mr. Penn, But as a matter of fact, it is not a good practice to enclose the roots of a sea grape tree. That's not a good practice. There's several environmental practitioners in the room, and they can all attest to that. So that's simply what we are pointing out, that it is not a good practice. So I'm not going to have that debate now. It's not a good practice to box in the roots of a sea grape tree. It actually helps to encourage erosion of the sand over time. Okay, so we will be looking at, there are a number of sea grape trees remaining along the beach that do have a lot of seedlings around them, in particular on the western end. So that will be part of the strategy as well, to harness some of those seedlings and use them as source material for growing trees within the nursery. Okay? And Mr. Penn, I think we'll seek to include all of the important points for feedback in any survey effort that we have, because again, we are hoping to have a much larger turnout tonight, as well as a much wider cross-section of the community. So I think it's important that we hear the feedback of a range of stakeholders before coming to final decisions. Okay? Is there anything else before we close?
We would like to thank the Honorable Premier, the Minister for Health and Social Development, the Minister of Natural Resources and Labor, for being with us, and rest assured that they have listened, they are here, and they have listened to you directly, in addition to the fact that the presentation obviously would have been rendered, and there is a lot of space, and we do mean this, there is a lot of space for additional comments to be given. There will be an open period until the 15th of November, so whether you decide you would like to call or use email or whatever the case may be, please do use this time to continue providing feedback. Ms. Penn would have made the point that this is a midpoint in the planning process, because there is yet another version that will be generated as a result of the feedback that would have been given tonight. So, pardon? Yes, in addition to the fact that we had a virtual, thank you, Minister, we had the virtual meeting on Monday, and we would have also received feedback at that time, which was very helpful. So I think that the take-home message is that we are listening to you. We want to continue to have a dialogue with you. I know that there are a lot of interests on the beach, some commercial, some recreational, and balance is the key word here. We're going to have to compromise, and we're going to come to a space, I think the Premier made the point of having, or a Premier or Minister for Health, that we will come, hopefully, out of these discussions with a unified view as to how we're going to protect this beach and enable the commercial activity to continue. So I'd like to really commend and thank Ms. Burnett Penn, Mr. Hastings, our team, and I especially want to single out the wonderful team of the Government Information Services, who have stayed with us and ensured that we have this interaction not only available physically here, but also online. The recording will be available, obviously, on government's Facebook page. So we'll continue to have this dialogue, and we look forward to your additional comments. So with that, we'd like to thank you again for coming, and blessings. Good night. So any conversations we can obviously continue. Thank you.